Alright, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back for another video. I got this Bolens riding lawnmower here. A buddy of mine from work says, hey, I might throw this thing out. It's got some problems going on with it. Maybe you could fix it. I said, sure, bring it by. I'll take a look. So first things first, what's going on with this is somebody has a fuel shut off on it. Obviously there's a carburetor problem, and what it was doing was allowing the fuel to go into the crankcase. So before we even get started, first things first, I'm going to change the oil on it. And then we're gonna get into the carburetor and see what the hell's going on. He did say it got ran like that, was smoking real bad. So I'm gonna either do a leak down test or compression check and maybe stick my bore scope in there. I just want to make sure that there was no damage done to the cylinder or anything. Make sure it's worth repairing. Should be usually. Sometimes if you get lucky, most of the time, as long as you don't run it forever like that, you can get lucky and it won't really hurt the motor for the most part. So let's get started. First things first, I'm going to get these 3/8 off. On these tractors, the whole front will come right off. There's two here. I think there's one down here. I think there's about 6 or 8 of them. Then I'll expose the motor and we'll go from there. Alright, we had 2 bolts down here in the front, 1/2 inch, and then 2 bolts on each side, 3/8. Unplug your headlights if they're plugged in. This one doesn't have working headlights. Slip this off. They got the fuel line all tied up with a coat hanger, which is interesting. So get this off. Set it off to the side. Alright, let's see what we got going on. First things first, I notice. Don't know what the hell you call this. Coat hangers or mechanics wire for fuel line. That's a mess. This whole motor's a mess. So probably gonna wind up taking this off the lift. As you can see, I got my ideal lift. I love this thing. Probably wind up taking this outside and washing it. Here they got bolts to the engine cover. So, and get the oil drained out of it. I'll show you how to do that. It's real simple. Now this tractor does come equipped with the idiot design for the oil drain. They should have a little tube coming down here or off to the side. They don't, so I got a pan. We're gonna have an absolute mess, but is what it is. I'm trying to use some of this cardboard to direct the oil down into my pan. Hope it works. Yeah, it'll work. So, not to bore you guys watching me sit here and babysit draining this oil disaster, I'll show you when we get to the carburetor side of this, because before I even try to run this thing or anything else, I'm going to open up the carburetor and get the goofiness they got going on there figured out. And I'm also going to check the cylinder. I'll just put my bore scope in it. I should have mentioned to you guys, this is a 17 horse Briggs on this. It's a OHV motor, overhead valve. They take 48 ounces of oil. So let me get her filled up. I do want to mention too in this video, I know in the beginning I was telling you the symptoms and stuff. I did check this. It does have good compression. I just spun it over with my hand and I could tell it's got strong compression. When you work on stuff like this for a long time, you're able to tell. I mean, obviously if it starts giving me some symptoms, I'll do a leak down test, go further, but I know there's enough compression to get this thing running. So let me get this oil filled up. Now we can start getting this carburetor apart. Looks like the handle for the air filter's broke. So we might have to figure that out if we get it running good enough. Air cleaner's not terrible. It can be blown out and reused. Save the guy a little bit of money. Pre-filter, it's dirty. Get this fuel line off first. There's a shut off, so I'm not going to drain the tank. What's in there smells and looks pretty fresh, so I don't know how long this thing's been sitting for, but the fuel line is rock hard. I'm going to have to replace it. It's split up by the tank too. So, and I'm going to get this stupid shutoff they got on here out of here. I don't know why you wouldn't just fix it right instead of fixing it this way, but hey, whatever. Everybody does their own thing. Okay, fuel line's off. Now we got to get this shroud off. There's going to be 2 3/8 on the back that you got to get off. And then in the front, there's going to be these. Which one was already out. They were nice enough to take it out for me. They're going to be a star head. I'll tell you what size they are when I get them off. The bolts on the front of the shroud are going to be T40s. You can see somebody was nice enough to leave all this stuff hand tight for me. So I like to call that playing. Somebody's been working on something and then you get a hold of it and you got to straighten it out. Call that somebody played around. I'm going to wash this shroud. I'm going to wash everything, guys. This motor is a mess. Now for your carburetor, it's going to be real simple. Here's your linkages. Once you get the intake loose, you're going to tip the carburetor back. You get your choke rod out, and then you can pull your spring out right now. You can watch me do it. There you go. The other one, when you tip this carburetor down a little bit, you slide that linkage out. I lied, the choke linkage you can actually slide out right here. You can leave it on the carb, then take it off the carb. I'll show you what I mean. Let me get this intake off. Also, this has the electronic solenoid down here. Make sure you pull your wire off. There is a way to test those with a 9-volt battery. I might show you on this video. I probably will test this one just because I don't know anything about this machine. I try to like cover all my bases. I should have done a spark test on this before I even went this far. It's kind of my own fault, but it's a Saturday. I don't have much going on and something to do. Let's get this intake off. These are 3/8. These off. Now, like I told you earlier, you can pull your choke rod right out of here. Just slips in. Tip your carburetor back. Pull your governor rod out. On the back, you're going to have your vent for your crankcase. And look at this carburetor, guys. I mean, this thing is a mess. So we're going to get the float bowl off. I'll show you how to do that. I have a little 1/2-inch wrench I made. I don't know if it's here at the house or not. I had to grind it down to fit in here. I'll get it over on the bench. We'll bring you over there. Now that we got our float bowl off, you can see there's some crud in there. The O-ring did come off inside of it. We're looking for either a bad float, which could be filled with fuel. It looks like the needle is moving, so maybe this carburetor has a seat problem. Not sure, but we're going to pull the float pin out of this. We get a little pick, push it out, and then we'll pull that out. Take your float out. Always shake it. This is a rubber tip needle in here, so maybe the rubber's bad or it had dirt in it. I don't know yet. I'm gonna have to take a look at it. I usually use a magnifying glass, especially because, like I said, this one has symptoms of a bad seat or something going on, or I'm gonna have to look at the seat inside of there. And then last but not least, we'll pull our 2 jets out of this thing. There might be another jet up top. It is so dirty. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the whole thing in the ultrasonic cleaner. When it comes out, if there's another jet that I need to take out, I will be sure to share that with you guys. You're going to pull a little pilot jet out of the side of this. I have a nice screwdriver that's just great for doing this. Take that jet out. We're just going to clean everything, go through this whole carburetor. Then you're going to have your main jet in the middle. Make sure you get a nice tight fit on it with your flathead. I don't know if this flathead's going to work for this one. I'm going to have to get a bigger one so I don't strip it. Be extremely careful with these. I have a whole drawer of flatheads. I found one that fit a lot tighter in there. Sometimes I've even taken cheap screwdrivers and grinded them down to get them to fit nice and tight, because if you strip that brass jet, you're kind of screwed. You're either going to have to dig it out and get another one, or you're going to be looking at getting a replacement carburetor, because you got to get it out to get it clean. This one actually looks pretty clean, but I'm not going to take any chances. I got it off. I cleaned it out for the guy. It's got rather large orifices because this is a bigger motor than, say, your 5-horse. You can see the holes in the jet. It's actually pretty clean inside of here. There's some gunk down in the middle. And that's going to be it for right now. So we'll fire up the ultrasonic cleaner. We got it right here. Get the basket out. We gotta plug it in first, I guess. Sometimes power helps. Get the basket out. I'm just gonna throw it in there, kind of like that, and I'll show you when it's done. I decided I am gonna take the intakes off this. These are 7/16 on the back. You get this off, then you're gonna have to get these studs out. They look like 3/8 or maybe a 5/16. I'll let you know in just a second. 5/16 did crack them loose. It is a little loose on there, so it could be a metric size, but I was able to get them loose. Pull these studs out. And there you have it. Got your gasket. Just gonna soak everything. Put all my little basket here. It was just too long to soak everything at once. Plus I figured I better check the gaskets. I do soak my gaskets. A lot of people don't like that. They'll replace them. I'll check them when they're done. I mean, the guy doesn't want to put a ton of money in this thing anyway, so let's just get it running. Alright guys, I just want to show you testing the solenoid here. You could just plug it in the machine, turn the key on, should pop down. I got just 2 spade connectors I kind of cut so I can cram them in there on an angle to get them to touch. And I just got 2 bare wires, and I'll show you what's going to happen with this. Bring this camera in so you guys can see what's about to happen. Now here's the solenoid, just like that. And I got my 12-volt battery. Hopefully you're going to be able to see. Connect the power. See that? It releases, brings it down. So when the power's on the riding lawnmower, it'll drop this piece down like that and let the fuel flow up to the main jet. So that's just a real quick way. I've always bench tested stuff like that in case there is an electrical problem going on with the mower. When I do put it back on, I will hit the key and make sure that it is working, but then I can verify both ways. I know the solenoid's good, and when it's on the machine, I can verify that it's good on the machine. It's easier while you got it apart to just do it on the bench. You know, that's kind of stupid, I guess. You could just do it on the mower, but hey, it's just what I do. You know, it's the way I like to do things. I guess I'm a little different, but we still got that carb soaking, so as soon as we get that out of there, we'll get it cleaned up. While that carburetor's soaking, I noticed on this flywheel here, the pickup was super rusty. So what I did is I took some emery cloth, or Scotch-Brite rather, and cleaned it up. I am going to take the coil off this and clean it. I mean, we're already this far into it, and I don't know how the spark is on this machine. You can tell it's been sitting outside. So, just going to go ahead and take it off, and I'll show you guys how I gap it. I use the business card method. Could use feeler gauges too, if you wanted. But I'm sure it's pretty rusty. So I want to make sure we cover our bases here, so we're not taking this back apart 10 times. Well, hopefully not. I'll pull the wire off the plug and just lift your coil right off. There'll be a wire underneath here. That's your ground to kill the engine. You can see the pickups are really dirty on this, so let me clean them up and we'll put it back on. Now what I'll do is I'll put this wire back on your ground. Just slips on. And then I'll move the flywheel to where the magnet is in front of the coil. And I'll put my business card right in between. Right there. You'll feel the magnet stick it. Put my 2 screws in. Give them a good tight turn. Not over tight, but you want them tight. Now I'll turn the motor to be able to slip the business card out. You'll see. There you go. Boom. Now you're gapped. You're ready to rock. You'll have some good arky sparky. I'm going to siphon the fuel out of this tank. It's good fuel. And I'm going to replace this fuel line and get this crap out of here. I mean, this is just ridiculous. So I'll get it down as low as I can get it, and then I'll take the line off at the tank. I got some 1/4-inch line. I keep that around the house, and I'll make a new fuel line. I'll show you when it's on. Alright, I'm just getting the fuel filter on. I had a brand new one laying around, so go ahead and put a new one on for them. Got the fuel line on the tank. It was kind of a bugger to get in there to get it on, but we got it on. I don't know if I haven't mentioned any of my small engine videos besides the jet ski project. This fuel line, if you put it in hot boiling water in a pot it'll be really easy to work with in case you guys get a roll it's all wrapped up. So we got that. We'll put some gas back in there after we get that carb on, and let's tackle getting that carburetor together. Alright, now that we got something that looks like a carburetor, the bowl's nice and clean, carburetor's pretty damn clean. I had to use my ultrasonic cleaner and my parts washer and the hose to get these clean. I've been a long time since I worked on a machine this dirty. So anyway, I'll take my air hose, blow the main jet out, start blowing the carburetor. I'll blow air in all the passageways, especially up here. Make sure everything is really cleaned out good. Also the little pilot jet, I wipe my float off good with paper towel. I'll blow the pilot jet out. The bowl seal, the gasket, float bowl gasket stayed in the bowl, so that's cool. Makes it easy to put back together. Now I do want to inspect this needle, and we're going to have to do some testing here to see what's going on. As I stated earlier, a lot of times I'll take a magnifying glass and I'll look at the rubber tip on this needle to see if there's any distortion or anything like that that could cause this not to seal. I have a feeling with how dirty this machine was that it's more than likely had dirt in the seat. I'll take a look at the seat too. I'll look down in there best I can, and when we put it back together we're going to make sure it seals. So let's start putting it back together. Put my main jet in first, right down the middle of the carburetor. Screw that back in. Always make sure those orifices are really cleaned out too. If you have to, take torch tip cleaners or anything like that to get all the gunk out. If any one of those are plugged, it's not going to run right. Now that I got butterfingers, let's see if I can get this jet back in. These jets, you don't go super tight with them. Just get them in there, they'll stop. Pilot jet on the side here. It's hard. You guys really can't see much. My fingers are in the way. Get the pilot jet in. Like I said, don't go tight or super tight, just snug it up. They're just brass. You can see I'm just using 2 fingers. Just like that. Now, slip your needle on your float, just like this. Hold your carburetor up like this. Slip your needle down in the seat. Boom. Get the float pin, wherever I may have set that. Right here. Put your float pin back in it. So we'll get the float bowl on. I haven't done this stuff in a long time as far as checking for seat problems. I try to avoid it. They can be a real headache. But I don't mind something to tinker with. So we'll get the float bowl back on there. Like I said, the seal is in the bowl. It stayed in there. So under normal circumstances you would replace it. There we go. I got it up back on there. Got it on there real good. You're going to want to put your fuel solenoid in there. Just thread right in, just like that. Tighten her down. Now on this carburetor there is a air screw right here for your mixture. I didn't take it out. I can see the passageway right there. It looks pretty darn clean, so I'm not going to screw with it unless I have trouble with this thing. Alright, what I'm going to do to test the needle and seat in this carburetor is I'm going to flip it upside down with no fuel in it, and I'm going to do 5 inch pounds of mercury, or whatever they call it on these vacuum gauges. I can't remember right now. I'm just going to pump it up to 5, once I get a good seal here first. With it upside down, the float will be closed. Alright, you guys can see I got this carburetor tore back apart. My plan was to test the needle and seat, was to pump my vacuum gauge up to 5" and let it sit. Well, it's not. So I took the float back off. When I pump it up, I can hear the air hissing out. I'm almost positive, even though the needle looked good, I'm almost positive there might be a very small indentation in the rubber of the tip of the needle, and it's leaking. Because if I push down on it, you can see it'll hold pressure. If I let up on it, it won't. With this carburetor being flipped upside down like this, that needle should be sealed. So I'm going to go ahead and order a new needle. I'm going to double check the seat in there. So when I get the new needle in, I'll show you on the video, or I'll show you on here. Alright guys, I want to show you what I did to get this seat out. I'm going to replace this seat. It's a brass seat. So what I did is I took a 1/4 tap, tapped it, I put the bolt in my vise like this, and what I did is I grabbed the carburetor and I just started wiggling and pulling really hard up, and as I was wiggling like this and coming up, boom, seat's out. I got a new seat on the way, new needle on the way. It was about 20 bucks for the parts, so when they get here we'll put them in. Okay guys, we're back on the tractor. Here's your seat number. It's a 690577. That's a Briggs. Give you your needle number. It's gonna be a 231855S. It's got the rubber tip needle. This should do the trick. Let's get it in this carburetor. We're not even gonna talk about it. It took over a week. Somebody sent me a muffler bolt. I don't know how you get this part number of a 790833 mixed up with a 690577, but the seller made it right and everything's good. So let's get the carb and I'll show you how to drive the seat in. Alright, what we're going to use here is commonly used for guns and stuff. It's a brass punch kit. Got it on Amazon, they're cheap. Now on your old seat, you're going to see a line on where it's sat all the way down, so you know how far to drive it in that carburetor. Okay, you're going to tip your carburetor up, but you have to be careful not to break or bend these governor linkages. You break that, you're gonna have to replace them. You bend them, it's not gonna run right. So it looks like this is gonna sit up on the plastic pretty decent. I gotta be careful not to break these plastic intakes, so I might put my hand or something. I got it on a couple rags, number one. So get the new seat out and we'll start tapping her in. Now I'll show you. A lot of people don't replace these. I've worked on thousands of carburetors and usually we would sell them a new one, but this guy's a real decent guy. I work with him and trying to get it running for him for cheap as possible. I got to take this jet back out. I just had it in here so I didn't lose it. Let me get that out and I'll show you how we drive her in. Alright, you're going to drop your seat in place. Obviously the beveled end is going to go into the carburetor. It's going to be really hard to show you guys this on camera, so bear with me. I'm going to show you the best I can. We're going to take this punch. As you can see right here, the punch is a little bit bigger. It's brass. Like I said earlier, it's a little bit bigger than the diameter of that seat. And take this little tiny hammer they give you. And now I'm hoping with it just resting up on the plastic intakes, we should be able to drive this in. I know my hand's going to be in the way. We're just going to gently start tapping it, or driving it. I'm using the nylon side of this. We don't want to get carried away. You don't want to damage it. You'll feel her seat. You'll feel her stop. Now we're going to look at our old seat, and I can see that that's in just about as far as the old seat. I got to go a hair more. I think that's going to be it right there. Looks pretty dang close. It's a 5/16 brass punch I'm using. Just want to make sure it gets driven in nice and level. And we're going to try that. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to open up our needle. Make sure when you open these packages you don't rip it on the rubber side or start bending it against the rubber side and tear that up. We're going to put our needle in there and we're going to do a vacuum test on it with my vacuum gauge. Let me go get it and we're going to make sure it holds. If it holds, we're good to go. Now you guys can see what I did on my gauge. I pumped it up to about 5 inch-pounds of vacuum. I got my needle just laying in there. And we're just going to let her sit for a few minutes. And we want to make sure she doesn't drop. I can tell you right now, it's already fixed the problem. It was leaking majorly before. So I'm going to let it sit for, let's just say a couple minutes. I want to make sure before we put this all back together and get too excited thinking we got it fixed. So without further ado, I'll let it sit. Put our float back in. We'll put our little pilot jet back in. We'll put this back on the machine. I want to show you something too when I go to put this back on the machine that I noticed when I started really looking it over. It's important that you do this. I'll show you when we get over there. Alright guys, we're going to put our new needle back on the float. Slips in there, a little slot. Hopefully you can see. I'm trying to rotate it so you guys can see. I'll stand it up. See, it just slips right in there. Now you're going to drop it on the carb, right down into the new seat. And put your float pin back in. Work it up and down, make sure you got good action. Should sit about level. A little bit in, it's fine. Now you're going to put your float bowl back on. Obviously, like I told you earlier, the seal stayed in this float bowl. So when you put it back on, you're going to have to kind of mess with it to get it seated on there. Put your solenoid back in. Now let's get this back on the machine. I'm going to take the camera over there. Oh, wait a minute. See? Mr. SRX, you got ahead of yourself, buddy. Two things. One, the pilot jet. It's got to go back in the side here. This damn thing would have never ran right without that. I'd have been guessing all day. It's small, so it's kind of got to mess with it. That's why I leave my fingernails a little bit long. Get it started. Judge me and say whatever you want, but it comes in handy to be able to use your nails for stuff like this. Okay, now look, the seat or this bowl gasket come off. Still in good shape. So what I'll do is I'll actually take and put it on the carb now, so I know it's seated good. You gotta just roll it on there. You gotta work it on. Be easy with her. She'll come along. Make sure it ain't rolled or anything. Boom. That's on. Float bowl on. Just want to make sure. Hate taking stuff apart twice. Alright. Now that we got that on, I'll tighten it up. Let me get a wrench that fits in there like I showed you earlier on this video. And I'll take you over to the machine. I want to show you something very important. Now, as you guys can see, I've been busy in here cleaning. Let me explain something to you. Obviously, air-cooled engine, these are air cooling fins. This thing was so blocked up, I can't believe it was cooling. So what I did is I got a cordless shop vac. I've been in here lowering the heat shield, taking a little flathead, I got it laying somewhere around here, and picking in the cooling fins and trying to dig all this garbage out. Now what I should do is take this mower off, put a rubber plug in here, block this breather vent off, and block the gas line off, and hose it, you know, put engine bright on here and clean this up really well for the guy. I want to show you what happens. This mower, I'm surprised, didn't overheat. I don't think. You pull a dipstick out. Let me wipe the end off on this paper towel here. I know this is not the best example. On the end of these dipsticks, if a motor overheats like this, an air-cooled motor, you'll get discoloration on here. Kind of like a rainbow, or on the plastic dipsticks, it'll get real discolored. It means it overheated. I cannot believe this one did not overheat. This is the worst one I ever seen. I wish I was recording earlier before I started cleaning this all up. It was terrible. I mean, it was the worst one I've ever seen, and I worked in the shop for 5 years. So anyway, I'm going to finish vacuuming. I'm going to get this cleaned up really nice. And then we're going to get the shroud back on. We'll get the carb back on. And we'll see if we can't get this darn thing to run. I want to point out one more reason why you want to clean these up really good. When you start getting caked on stuff like this, I mean, it's just packed in there. There's a good chance, one, could have a blown head gasket that's leaking around one of the corners. Two, most of the time you'll have a bad valve cover gasket. So once you get this all cleaned up and you let this engine run and get nice and hot, you'll be able to see before you give it back to the customer, whoever it might be, or your own, that it doesn't have either or. Well, obviously a blown head gasket you would know is when you're working on this thing, when you get it running, but you know, a valve cover gasket, you don't want to give it back leaking and all that crap. Also, another thing I wanted to say about that, and I can't remember, it was just on the top of my head. Damn, I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, so something like this, oh, with the symptoms it had, and obviously bad needle and seat, and the crankcase flooding with gas, it's very possible that all this residual buildup could be when the crankcase got overfilled. It was spewing oil out the breather tube. It was just a mess. Somebody was running it like this. So I don't even know, you know, how good this motor is going to be till we get it running. I know it's got compression, so let's get the shroud back on. Let me find it. I did forget to mention to the guy I'm going to have to get him set up with some kind of thing to hold the air cleaner in. Oh, before I put the shroud on, gotta put this cover back up. I kind of was just screwing around with this thing one night, guys, a little bit, and what I wanted to do was get it cleaned out, you know, get it cleaned up. So right here you're gonna have your wire that's gonna go back on. There's a little screw, 5/16. Let me find it. Show you how much crap was in this thing. This vacuum was clean before I got started. Look at the amount of stuff that was built up around that, around the cooling fins. I mean, just incredible amount. This thing would have never cooled. Surprised it cooled the way it did. I gotta try to find that 5/16. I set it somewhere. Maybe it's under the deck. Okay, guys, I'm gonna try to speed this video up a little bit for you. Your shroud's gonna go back on the same way you took it off. Duh. I mean, that's common sense. Obviously, they had the bolts and stuff loose on this thing, so these are going to be your two front bolts. They got the little stars, and then your two back bolts are going to be the 3/8. Or right here, they got the studs on them. You'll see them. Those are your two back ones for the shroud. Make sure you get it all lined up. On the other side, you got to make sure you tuck that metal housing in underneath that shroud. You want that air to really cool that motor. So let me get it all tightened up. We'll get the carb on. Actually, I lied to you guys. Before we put this shroud on, let's get the carb on. Duh, Mr. SRX. Let me get the carb. Okay, real simple. Choke, it's gonna go in here. Or actually slip it under this. And it's gonna tuck back in the little spot here because it just gets pushed up. Gotta find where the lever is that pushes it. Right here. And then your throttle is gonna slip in like this. Kinda gotta work it in there. Sometimes it can be a bugger. Make sure you put your spring for your throttle tension. Might have to mess with this choke a little bit, guys. It lays right in there, right back here. Make sure you also hook up your vacuum, or your vent. Not your vacuum, your vent for your crankcase. Make sure you get that back on your carb. You do not want dirt flowing in that motor. Now, pull your paper towel out. Find the proper screws that go in here. Make sure your seal is good, your rubber seal. These are just 3/8 bolts that hold this carburetor on. Oh, okay guys, before we put it on, I want to show you something with this choke. I knew I wasn't doing something right. This thing's been out here for a week, torn apart. Okay, let me bring the camera in. Right here, you're gonna see that choke has its own little home. It slips right in that little slot right there. You see that? That little slot right in here. Got to make sure that you slip it in that little slot. And this rod pushes it when you work that throttle. I believe that's in the right position right here. I can always change it, no big deal. So we'll get 3/8 bolts in here. Just push back. Get her started by hand before we run them in, obviously, so you don't cross thread them. Let me get those in there off camera. Now you know how the governor and everything goes, you can see it. I also want to mention, make sure you clean up your sealing surface. I'm going to get a flat scraper blade and clean this up really nice before we put this carb on. Okay guys, I use 1/4 inch drive. I think I mentioned it earlier in this video to tighten all this stuff up. You can't go crazy with it, you'll bust this plastic intake. And now that it's sitting on there, you can lift your throttle up to make sure your choke's in the right position. You can see the butterfly close and the throttle's all the way up. You won't be able to see it on camera. When you pull the throttle down till it hits that first click, you'll see the butterfly all the way open down in the intake here. And you know you're all set. Okay, make sure you plug in your little solenoid wire or else that will not open and you will not get fuel. You will not be happy. Okay, get your fuel line here. Boy, that's funny. A lot of red in there. Let me get a sample here. That's really weird. Alright guys, I kind of already dumped some out. That was really weird. I never had that happen before. No, maybe if it's a new fuel line or what. We're gonna put that fuel line back on, make a mess of course. It was weird, it was like red stable in there and I don't use stable, so I don't know if there was residue sitting in the bottom of the tank or what. I don't want that crap in there. I'll save my stable information for a different video. If you're using it, read the back of the bottle. Don't put it in the damn machine. If you put it in the machine, you're gonna overdo it. It ain't gonna run. It'll deplete the octane. Okay, boom, boom. I'll get to the rest of the stable story one day. I've seen that stuff tear up so much stuff. You overdo it. Okay, your intake's gonna slide on here. That's why you gotta wait to get this cover on. I gotta line up the other side, the metal shroud. It's self-explanatory, no big deal. Hopefully this clamp seals. Like I said, the bolts I already explained in the video, so we'll get those on and we'll see if this thing runs. Alright guys, the shroud's back on. I do want to show you what I'm talking about on this other side. Excuse the poor camera work, she's on a tripod. Right here is this metal cover. You can see the clip. Okay, now my pre-filter, I just blew it out with my air gun. You can see it looks pretty good. Put that bad boy in there. The air filter's decent, guys. I mean, definitely can get away with it. Blow it out with your air gun. It doesn't have to be replaced. It's not packed in the inside. Now, this cover needs to be cleaned. I still got to get that cleaned out. But the handle is broke on this. There's supposed to be a plastic handle here. I'm gonna have to talk to the guy about it because we're gonna have to do something. I can't have an air filter loose, so it'd be sucking dirt. When I run these, I'm not even on this video gonna put the hood back on this thing or anything. What I am gonna do, obviously it's getting late in the garage. It's a beautiful October night. It's 70-some degrees out. It's awesome for the end of October. I'm gonna fill this thing up with gas. I got a fishing tournament this weekend. I'm gonna let it sit a few days just to make sure that needle and seat is correct on this. I don't want the guy to have to bring it back. Hey Drew, it's got oil in the crankcase again, blah blah blah. So I want to make sure it's right. We used to do that in the shop. We let them sit for 24 hours if they had a needle and seat issue. Check the oil, make sure you don't have gas in the oil, and boom, you're good to go. So even if you get it running, just let it sit overnight, just to be sure, before you give it back to the guy. It's one thing I like to do. So I'll fill it up, and next part of this video, we'll see if she runs, and we'll see about all this build up on the front. Guys, I love this lift table. It comes down a little fast. I still got to adjust the valve on it, but I think it's awesome. Alright guys, so I've been messing with this motor, and this is a weird one. It's got good compression, or decent compression, but I think the sleeve is loose in the block. Never seen this before. So what I'm going to do is I might make this a two-part, I don't know yet. I'm going to take the carb and everything back off, and I'm going to pull the head off this thing. I'm just going to do a real quick teardown video, because if it gets into a bad sleeve or something, we're not going to go any further with this. So I'm kind of just going to make it a real fast boom boom. I'm not going to explain a lot. It's not like we're doing a head gasket here. So let me get this carb and intake back off and get the valve cover off and see what we got going on.